THWACKcamp!
Yeah.
THWACKcamp!
Hello everyone and welcome to today's panel. The executive BabelFish reports your CIO wants to see. You know, too often communication between executive leadership and IT on the ground really gets in the way of smooth service delivery for users and the CIO's ability to meet their SLA with the CEO. We've invited 3 technical experts and moreover communication experts about breaking through ineffective procedures, rejecting IT dogma, and challenging habitual behavior. And now while trending topics like DevOps and Agile may pop up in this discussion, we're primarily going to be focused on changing communications culture to align IT with the business, rather than being methodologically prescriptive about how to accomplish that. You've told us over and over again that you have great ideas about improving IT responsiveness to your businesses, and our panel will focus on how both sides can communicate better to get great IT ideas into production. I'm Head Geek Patrick Hubbard, and joining me today are leaders from both sides of the conversation. First, we have 2 technology executives. First, Ronnie Johnson, Chief Information Officer of SolarWinds. Ronnie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You know, it's really interesting because the THWACK community doesn't always get a chance to meet some of the senior executive staff here, and they always ask questions when we see them at trade shows or on THWACK. It's like, well, how does SolarWinds do IT? And I guess the role is actually pretty much what you'd expect.
Maybe and maybe not. This is, first of all, my dream job. I get to provide IT services for the coolest IT software company in the world. Kind of my scope of responsibility includes development, operations, DevOps including that,
right.
Enterprise architecture, project management, and the typical infrastructure jobs. So.
Awesome. Yeah. And then you get to deal with a little bit of care and feeding of the development team and some snowflakes and a little bit of everything
We have
else.
a lot of unique little snowflakes.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Second, we have Joel DeLisi, Chief Technology Officer for Kinzer Software. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Patrick. Well, happy to be here.
Well, in Kinzer, you're focused on healthcare, right? So you're doing clinician mobile applications a little bit, but a lot of services and SaaS and running data centers to actually enable healthcare at physicians' offices.
So Kinzer basically is a leader in the post-acute world in healthcare, which basically is all around delivering healthcare at home or hospices at home. And so basically, we provide a software for those agencies to actually run their business day in, day out. And we deliver that as a SaaS set of solutions and also mobile solutions in kind of disconnected scenarios. So it's a really interesting world where we have a lot of challenges, a lot of compliance, but also it's really rewarding because actually at the end of the day, you're actually helping getting people getting better, which is really, really good.
So a chance to make the world a better place, but also deal with DevOps at the same time.
Exactly. So that's a dream job.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
And last, representing the IT side of the house and most of you in THWACK is Mindy Marks. She's the Senior Director of IT for Sandow.
Hi.
Hey, well, thanks so much for being here. You know, and it's really funny because she's developed a really great working relationship and communications approach with Sandow's CXO team and reports directly to the CIO. And thanks for being here today, and also thanks for being the voice of people who actually have to get stuff done.
Yes, I'm definitely very hands-on. I do have a great rapport with my CIO, who I directly report to, but I am very much within infrastructure and rolling out projects. And I'm very much part of the team and communicating up and communicating down. So my role is very unique. I am very geeky too. I like to get my hands on a lot of equipment as well. But I also like the communication side and the business side and bringing value to what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here. Okay, so I suspect that I'm not going to really be saying much today, and that's really a relief. And by that, I mean that we all know what we need to do, right? What the opportunities are for IT to really transform our businesses. But oftentimes, it's really hard to know kind of where to get started. So let me start with this question. Just, you know, a great big omnibus question. The point of communication, whether it's planning, reporting, status, is to really be able to just get stuff done, right? And increasingly for IT and the business's demands on us is to get stuff done faster, to find ways to do things faster. So the first question is, from the business perspective, from the board's perspective, what does the business actually want from IT, right? Do they want speed, they want features, they want dependability, they want quality, they want cost control? What do they want? If they have to pick one thing, or at least a top couple of things, what do they want?
So I think they want it all, and they want it without having to communicate too much to IT. They just want us to get our work done, and we have to make sure we've set proper expectations, set specific kind of communication cadences and just deliver. They want us to be predictable. They want us to be accurate. They want high quality. They're never going to choose one. They've invested in a cost center of IT to deliver, and that's really just our jobs to do that work.
I would agree 100%. They want it all. They want it all from the top to the bottom, and I agree with you. They really don't. They really don't care about how you're getting it done. They want to see it done. They want to see the features there. They want to see it bringing the business quality. They want to see the new tool that's in place that we've provided. They want feedback from the people that are using it, telling us that it's a great tool and it's saving me time on my job and my business. I'm more effective, and I think they want it all.
Yeah, I don't think that they want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't want to hear about it, which actually is right. I think they should focus on the business level constructs and how do we make money, how do we stay in compliance. All of those are business drivers. All the tools on, hey, can I get on the Wi-Fi, can I get my power, all of that stuff, keeping the lights on. It's kind of assume it works. And so it's kind of an unfair fight that you have to fight when you're in charge, because you have to keep those things, you have to spend money doing that, but they don't want to hear about it because of expecting to work.
Co-equal top priorities.
Oh, we don't have that.
Yeah, that never happens.
never
Okay,
happens.
so maybe that's the place to start. I'm hoping that we eventually get to some reports that are actually, for example reports that are useful, right, with management. But that first step, right, having that conversation where you say to them, based on this budget, with these requirements, these are the subset of things that we can actually deliver to help them step away from that misconception that somehow you can do it all. How do you even start with that conversation?
I think it's really, you have to have great communication with the top of the business to be able to define those needs and requirements. I think you have to really pick the top things that are most priority to you and the things that you really think that you can accomplish. So many times, you're right, the list is endless. The things that we should be doing, need to be doing, even from hands-on on the ground. But really defining what's important to the business and what's going to bring the most value and where you're going to put your IT resources, I think is how you define what's important.
And I think that's the beauty of Agile and DevOps, is that you get a chance to go and list all of the priorities, make sure there's got a clear backlog, make sure that it's fully prioritized, and then you just determine what you can do against that list with the time and the resources that you have.
Yeah, but I think it's also about alignment. I think if you're going to them with your list and that doesn't match at all with what the business is trying to achieve, then it's going to be a tough battle.
Yep.
And so I think that's what it is. And sure, I think DevOps and all of that Agile can help in you managing that. But at the end of the day, it's all about alignment and getting sure that everybody's aligned on the same set of priorities, at least at the high level. You always have additional things that you have to take care of that will never go up on that list of priorities, but it's important there to actually have that.
Yes, and as the business changes fast, you have to change fast. So we have to adjust in our IT. You have your set things that you put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the next day, all of that is scratched because the business comes to you with a new idea and they're like, we're going to do this today, and this is what's important. And no matter all the time and money and effort you've put into this in your teams, you kind of really have to just be able to change fast and go with the business.
So you're talking about learning how to talk to the business about the business first.
Yeah.
So where do you think that breaks down? Is it that the business doesn't want to explain it to IT, or they think maybe IT won't be able to understand it or consume it, or is it IT, I just want to work the help desk and deal with my issues and try to get my new projects up and running, and I just don't really know, I want to use the requirements as a demarcation line between what I do and the business itself. Where does that first tendency not to communicate come from?
But I think that your example there about the help desk, that's what everybody think about when you think about IT. But the problem is IT is involved in a lot of other projects, sales enablement, all of those things, development, keeping the source
Help
and all
desk
of
is
that.
the great interrupter.
It is, and it's always seen as like, it's this thing where people go when they have problems. But I think it's not just IT. It's not about answering problems. It's about actually being proactive and supporting the business and going forward. And I think that's where IT has the most actually to help and provide value is on that front, and not just being reactive to problems. So I think that's important to actually focus on that, and I think it's part of it is IT needs to be part of the discussions within the different departments and making sure that you're supporting the business.
Right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think really a lot of times your help desk or the people that are really seeing the problems, they're helping your sales team, they're helping your HR team, and they're actually dealing with issues that your user probably has a better solution or a solution that we could provide them to do their job better. And they're really seeing it from the bottom. So I think, having that communication and really watching what's going on at that level, at the help desk level, really start to show business problems, things where we can bring value from a DevOps team, from an infrastructure side, from a software development. We can provide things by really understanding what's going on at that bottom tier. They really do bring so much value that I think kind of gets skipped over. On my team, I have 2 engineers that work directly with me, and we have team meetings every week. And I listen to all their problems, and a lot of times things that we're doing on infrastructure is affecting them, and we have no idea that's even affecting them. We rolled out something without communication. We made a change, and now they're seeing the effects. By having that conversation with them, it's letting us know, hey, look, there's an alarm that's going up here, and yeah, we've affected something somewhere, and let's fix it. Or we have a real business problem that we need to fix, a process, a workflow, something we can do better.
The one thing I'll say, what we should aim for in IT is to not just be problem solvers, but to really understand the strategic direction of the business so that we actually can be business enablers. And that's one of the it's an aspirational goal, and you have to kind of really build a mature IT department to get to that. But if we start at the problem level, we're often not invited to solution to actually enable the business for growth and kind of profitability.
But there's a big parallel between, particularly for software companies where you build products, and there's a whole set of processes around that where you do, product strategy. So that's kind of, you align yourself and the business with where you want to go. But then you also listen to your customers. You take that feedback loop. And it's funny how, I find it funny, how there's a dichotomy there between, how we build products and how we run IT within those software, companies, where we don't do a lot of those things there. Either we are very purely reactive, or we are, purely strategic, but then we don't take care of the, kind of care and feed of the internal users, and then take that feedback loop and bring that back in and make those services better. Basically, we just keep answering the same questions over and over again. And I think that's where we have, there's more to do there, and it's all about communication there.
And that just goes back to what you mentioned. We have to stay aligned. We're going to have to evolve, but we have to stay aligned as a team.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, the dev and DevOps is pretty well organized, and I think most people know what that is, right? Development has been development in various forms, but kind of narrowly defined since the beginning. But IT is more of sort of a snowflake in every environment where you find it, and that seems like one of those things to whether you actually have developers that are part of operations, or at least a willingness to find people and put them in non-traditional IT roles, like find people inside of the business and then bring them into IT, where you might say, why do you have a business analyst as a part of the IT team? Well, they actually know the business, and that was something we talked about the other day.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well in my department and in my current position. There was he was working for the company. He was super excited about the company, really knew the processes, the business in and out. We brought him over to the IT side. He started creating applications, working with a lot of the brands, building CRMs and really understanding what's going on from a comp, how these people sales are driven, and tweaking, reporting, providing so much. And he really came from just being an executive.
The level of depth I think some of our technical team members have to have require us to supplement them with people who actually have that business acumen or the domain expertise. And so I think it's a wonderful addition to be able to bring business people over into the technology team so that we can really make sure that we serve the business well.
I think it also goes vice versa as well. I think if you take an IT professional and you put them into the business analyst role and put them into a department that's having problems, and you sit there and you really figure out what the problem is, you can really take your IT knowledge and help the business in any department you put. I really think it goes both ways. Take somebody who's really great with process, understands the business, you can flip-flop both ways.
Yeah, I think what matters most is for them to be driven. Mm-hmm. If they are driven, then you can put them in whatever situation and they'll be good. They'll get something done. If somebody is not driven, then you're going to go nowhere with that.
So that really kind of brings another question, which is where does improved communication start, right? Does it start with someone who is an internal champion for aligning IT with the business and actually seeks out an executive sponsor? Does it start with executives who nurture and develop potential champions on that team? Is it both? Do they meet in the middle? What are a couple of ways to really accelerate that?
I think you need to have both top-down and bottom-up. I think if you have one of them, it's going to be super hard. You're going to hit a ceiling at one point, or you're going to hit a bottom if you come from the top. Because at the end, the people in the trenches are the people who are actually doing the work. And they need to communicate back up. And people at the top, they set the direction. If that is broken there, then you have a void in the middle. And so it's really both actually have to meet in the middle. And so it's extremely difficult if it's only one-sided, because you're going, it's an uphill battle. Right. And it's the same thing for whether you start an agile project or you start agile into a company that is not agile. If you're trying that in isolation of a team, it's extremely difficult. You can be successful in your team, but it's going to be extremely difficult to scale that. Right. It's the same thing there for communication.
Do you see that where politics tends to kind of get in the way, and a lot of times pilot projects are sort of used as that, and sometimes someone will be given extra resources, especially in a cost center, to do something a little bit differently, and then they're viewed by the rest of the team as a cowboy, right? And that there's almost can be some animosity there, that they're getting to do something special and fun, instead of maybe the executive goal was, I want you all to see the opportunity for us to invest more in IT as a function of transforming the business. Is that just sort of a missed opportunity to communicate better about the goals of that, so that if you start those pilot projects, if you bring dev or a specialist into a team to be able to say, hey, I'm doing this, and the rest of everyone on IT, this is an example that I would like for all of you guys to get involved with?
Yeah, I think the whole, there was one word in there, which is the specialist in the team there. I think that's a dangerous word, because it creates, that's how you create snowflakes. That's how you create something that actually is not scalable, because you have no single point of failure. I think we all have Joe, who's the guy on our team, or Alice, who's the girl on our team, basically. And if Alice gets hit by the proverbial bus, it's pretty bad. Right. And I think that's the danger there. I think that, and it depends on the company culture also. I mean, you look at Cisco, for instance, a lot of their innovation came by pulling their best engineers, putting them into a spin-off, getting them to work, and then taking them back in. Well, I think that's great for the people who are in that team. I think the people who stay on the main ship and see that other team there, it's extremely hard at that point to motivate them. And so I think that you have to be very careful about how you deal with that.
Absolutely. I encourage kind of transparency in our entire project portfolio. And if we take on a special project, if you will, we're very clear about why we're doing that, what objective we're trying to meet. And so we have to encourage transparency about why we're endeavoring to move these projects forward. What is the motivation, be it growth, revenue, productivity. We need to be really, really clear about why we're doing these bodies of work, and make sure that we're transparent about what we're setting out to accomplish.
Yeah, I agree. I think full transparency on a team is extremely important. I think that you can have teams that do have pilot programs, but if you explain it properly and the team is all on board with the goal at the end of the day of what they're working on, I think you're going to get the backing from the entire team. I think a lot of times it's when they don't know about it and they haven't heard about it, and it hasn't been brought up at the team meeting that we have, that we're going to work on this specifically because we're going to do it fast, and there's business reasons behind why we're doing it this way. I think people are on board. I think they just want to be told the truth. I think they want to know what's going on, and I think that if you do that, you have everybody's buy-in on the team.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if someone starts on a project and let's say they're doing some automation or working on deployment or delivery, and if you say to them, why are we doing this? Where you've maybe cut my budget for storage, or I need to actually do some hardware refresh as a part of a normal hardware cycle, and we're going to invest in this strange thing. And if you can say to them, well, this is actually so we do deployments Monday through Friday between 10 in the morning and 3 in the afternoons, and not on the weekends anymore. Most people can get behind that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. And the team that I lead, I find that has worked very well. We all have different levels. We're all in different levels of our career, from your help desk engineer to your director to your CIO. And when you put them all in the same room, although there's a lot of terminology they start to learn, acronyms that they were not familiar with, they start learning things about databases. And so you start having your help desk people really understand what's going on. And I think it moves their careers forward. They start to find which path they're going to take. And because we want to invest in your people. And so they've been there, and they're the ones in the trenches doing the tickets every day and working with the people. Sometimes not easy people, we all know. And you need to really find a path for them as well. Where are they going to move, or where are they going to find their love? What's your next step? I push you. Do you want to go into networking? Do you like security? Because you always want your people to go to the next step in their career. And I think by having them in those meetings, it starts brainstorming. It starts people really thinking.
Yep.
So what's an example I think we used the word quality just a minute ago, kind of talked about that, and businesses like to use that as a metric. It's not always easy to figure out what drives that, but what's an example of maybe a quality metric that you see when you realize that if you are communicating clearly with a team, or it's a champion on that team who's communicating clearly with you, what's a sign that they're beginning to get it, that you're giving them a little bit more leeway, a little bit more rope, and they are actually beginning to be more self-sufficient, they're better aligned? What are the sort of, the tea leaves that you read to determine that communication is actually improving the quality of service delivery?
That's a great question.
On my team, I've actually got a great example of this. So we're a very small team, and we all wear many hats, and we all are very hands-on at the end of the day as well. And so I've had to, kind of step out of that role and really give them the tools to say, I'm empowering you to move forward. You may make mistakes. That's not a problem. We'll deal with them. We all do, and it's a learning curve as you get there. So I've seen major growth and being able to step away a little bit. And then sometimes you have to go back and hold the hand again. Step away, step away, step away. Defining quality can be in so many different ways. I mean, that's such a vague term in saying, how do I define quality? The definition would be something without defect, right? What am I producing without defect? What am I putting into place that I don't have to redo? How many times am I revisiting the same problem without really fixing the problem? Those things can be all defined as, what do I define quality?
I think, to paraphrase that, for me, it's about rework. Because there's a beautiful book about that.
Yes.
But it really is about that. It is about that because if you look at it, if we build the wrong thing or if we deliver the wrong service, then that means that upstream we actually got the wrong requirements.
Right.
If we delivered it buggy, then that means that we did bad job in terms of implementation, and so that means that communication there was not happening.
Exactly.
And so it's at every single one of those phases, those are more of the KPIs that I'm tracking is what is the amount of rework that we have to do all along of the delivery chain.
I look at quality as an expectation, and you have to communicate and get really clear on what that defined expectation is. And so within, let's say it's a project delivery expectation, quality is scope, schedule, budget. If you look at from a coding perspective, it's defects, but it's setting an expectation. You may have a project where some certain level of bugginess is okay, but as long as you define that objective, that kind of that service level expectation, to me that equals quality. And if you hit that, then you've delivered, I guess, the quality expectation.
Right, and not to get stuck in sort of defect analysis paralysis. I mean, every time we get on an airplane, sometimes you think, how many bugs are known bugs are being tracked in the flight management software?
I'm getting on a flight at 6. Thanks for me thinking about it before I fly out.
Okay, well, so you talked about being able to communicate and try and fail. I mean, I think we hear the term fail fast a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I think most senior executives, a lot of CEOs talk about, we want to be able to enable fail fast, and they have peers who are using it in their organization, and it's really effective. Only other parts of the business maybe can respond a little bit more quickly. The runway and sort of the factory floor time for a lot of what we do in IT is a little bit longer. What are some of the ways that you can use communications and reports with senior execs to kind of nerf fail fast a little bit, to give yourself, to kind of create a little bit of a buffer to improve delivery, reliability and quality, and let them see that occasionally you will make mistakes, but you're mitigating risk?
We try to deliver minimum viable products, and so we make sure that within each sprint or within each quarter that we're actually delivering something. It doesn't mean that it's going to be defect-free. It just doesn't mean it's going to be something we can actually necessarily put in production, but we want to show that we want to demonstrate some level of value to get the investment to continue that work either into the next sprint or into the next quarter for work. And so I think there is a level of grace we get in delivering small work packages versus delivering larger kind of efforts.
Yeah, I think that's where in the past project get lost is, it takes 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and there's nothing, and then you're over budget, or it doesn't deliver the value that actually was expected. And I think that's where Agile, DevOps, all of those things actually are bringing, or lean, whatever process you want to use. It's all about showing increment of value to the end user and customer very quickly. And then you learn from that, and then you rinse and repeat, and you continue. The only thing is you can't just stop at the first MVP.
Yeah, I think you lose the stakeholders' attention at some point if you don't deliver. If they give you their expectations and then they don't get it fast enough, they've already moved on to the next project and completely forgot about it, and then now you don't have their buy-in. And now you're banging on their door to try to get them to do it, come back and revisit what you've just put into place. So I think being agile and using DevOps is really important when it comes to
I think in the spirit of reporting too, you have to actually show that you did what you said you were going to do. You have to actually be able to have something that's demonstrable, not just that MVP that says, here's what we said we're going to do, look, we have done it, and make sure you're kind of tracking and reporting on that. And also being transparent when you don't hit all of those particular tasks or work, the little smaller objectives within that.
So when you go to the point that you made about dependability is something that management actually does care about, or reliability. So you're suggesting that it's not, rather than just give a traditional report of availability or outage, right? Actually overlaying that with a metric for how quickly or the number of deployments that you've done and where they happen in there, so that you can actually show sort of continued reliability in spite of something that looks traditionally risky with waterfall, right? So, okay, so here's a question, because you brought up Agile, and of course I'm going to want to talk about that because DevOps fixes all the things.
Time to leave.
DevOps all the right. So I gave the example before of doing production deployments during the workday and not on the weekends or during maintenance windows. I think that's something we can all agree as an outcome of an Agile methodology, something that we want. Why is it difficult to even get started having that conversation? That seems like a good indicator of communication between executive and IT, is like if you even express an interest in Agile, sometimes does IT actually get pretty much panicked by that?
I think I would just make the first edit there about what you mean by Agile. Because I think for me, Agile, it's all about delivering customer value very quickly.
Right.
Okay, that may mean that you may want to deploy during the day. If it actually is not, it's a zero downtime deployment, it doesn't hinder them. But again, Agile by itself, it's all about customer value quickly and show increments of progress there. And so I think what I've seen a lot is that gets lost into a lot of organization, and they start focusing on techniques for this, for that, and they forget the big picture, which is I just need to provide value quickly to the customer, whoever that customer is. It's inside your enterprise, it's outside the enterprise, it's product customers. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, if you're not focused on those end users, then you're going to have a really hard time actually pushing Agile, because you're going to focus on the wrong things. You're going to focus on techniques.
Yeah, methodology, not principles.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. I find organizations are pretty receptive to Agile when they understand that this means that, let's say, the finance team is not going to have to, over the weekend, test something too. When we deliver value or change to a group, they have to make sure that they've kind of accepted it, even post-production. And so if it means that, hey, we're in our seats at the time that most people are available to actually do some of that test or that final production validation, it's convenient for everybody.
Mm-hmm. I see that more and more as well.
Now, if we do something risky, I do prefer to do that on the weekend.
Yes, or at least in the lab, right?
Oh yeah, in the lab.
Yeah, that's sort of those technical debts that a lot of times we don't think about. It's like, oh, we want to experiment. Great, let's do it in the lab. We don't have budget for lab. Okay, well, that's something to communicate about up front, right? One of the things that's kind of interesting, and we had talked about it earlier, was the types of reports that you would see. Like one of them would be adoption rate reports for new features and new technology that may be part of an application that's been around for a long time. Does that mean that IT really needs to know more about how the application works or the user expectations of that application to be able to figure out how to create those reports in the first place?
absolutely. If you don't, then you're flying blind, and that means you're not aligned with what the business wants.
Right. And you have a chance to sort of turn users into instrumentation as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so easy nowadays to actually collect a lot of data. I mean, you have a company that builds software for this. So, but you have to know how your end user are actually experiencing the product, and you need to know that live, and you need to be able to act on that. It's not just about collecting the data. If it's collecting it for the purpose of collecting it and not doing anything with it, then don't do it. Yeah. But you need to be able to react quickly. Like if you deploy a new UC communication, for instance, in a company, and you wait, and if you do a big bang deployment and you wait, 2 months after that to figure out if people are happy, then I think you've lost. Because you waited too long. You need to do that in steps, in increments. get feedback directly, a few days after, you have expectations about, hey, 50% of the user will actually, start using this actively, and if you're not on that, then you need to react to that. If you're below that adoption rate, well, then you have to think about what do we need to do to actually get that back. Did we get it wrong? Do we have the wrong solution? Do we have the right solution, but we implement it wrong? There's all of those questions that you have to answer. Yeah. And if above, then great. Then obviously you hit the mark even better than what you thought, and then you can continue.
Absolutely, and I think part of that is setting that success criteria and being willing to kind of, if you will, roll back or call that back if that's not the right solution.
And I think that reporting can be defined in so many different ways, right? We're using the word reports and reporting, but there's so many different types of reports that people use to create value for a company. You mentioned, anomalies. We're getting a report every day that we're looking at, but really it's not the report that's bringing a lot of value. It's when we have that anomaly and there's something that we really need to address and take care of that's affecting the business, that's affecting budget, that's costing us money, that can be a problem if we go down, such as,
Absolutely. I think IT leadership is not looking for, like, are we doing what we say we're going to do every day?
Right.
It's more so we set a service level objective, we set an expectation with our IT leadership teams, and we want to be alerted if there's any kind of leading indicators that we're off track, and if as soon as we kind of basically failed against that service level objective.
Yeah, and I believe that's where reporting really becomes helpful for IT. Is when it's bringing up those things that are really going to affect us, and how are we dealing with it, and are we communicating? For me, I would be communicating to my CIO, letting him know that this is the risk that we're looking at, and he may not have a physical report or an email or an Excel sheet or a Gantt chart. Well, not for so much for a report, for a Gantt chart, but he really wants me to come in and communicate that with him. And we're a small IT team, so I'm not sure how it works with communication.
Well, have you seen instances where you bring a novel report and they actually get excited about what's going on in IT? An example would be, to your point about not just showing availability, but actually like your ability to remediate novel issues, right? So almost a responsiveness report.
I do have like one example of a report, maybe kind of technical, but so our company has a lot of cloud services. We run everything in AWS heavily. And so I know anybody who has an AWS environment, cost is a big part of that. Controlling cost and not having your DevOps team throwing hardware when you have software problems or problems that actually exist in code. So we have a company, they have their own account, and I've kind of handed it off to the development team to kind of do their ops as well. And I got a report, and this report was probably one of the most valuable ones because they had decided to make changes and they didn't communicate, right? So the biggest key is communication. And the bill went from $2,000 to $10,000 in about 30 days. So it's a huge red flag. And if no one had caught that and that anomaly had not been brought up, the company would have paid $120,000 for an environment that they had no idea. So, having that type of report to me is very important if you're talking about like a physical report.
I'll say my two favorite reports to receive are reports of we saved money or reports of our information security vulnerability is low.
Okay, so you've brought up sideways risk. All right, so risk reporting is something that the business really does care about, and I think maybe in IT we think it's always unfortunate that sort of security comes almost last. It's sort of monitoring second to last, and then security last. And what are the types of security-related reports that you see from IT that gives you confidence that there's a reasonable assurance that nothing terrible is going to happen in the business? I mean, start with that, right? That thing that keeps the CIO awake at night and not able to turn in.
It's usually the vulnerability, basically our VAT scan results, and it's a vulnerability assessment tool that provides a result that says how we compare to other systems in our infrastructure and other companies in our industry with regards to how many vulnerabilities we either haven't patched or we're currently exposed to. And so when I see our scores, they actually usually score them with A to F. When I see our scores, as great passing grades, I can sleep a little better at night because there's always a new vulnerability, and we have to regularly assess our environment against those things. And so that's the one thing that I do actually absolutely read.
So along with that report, do you really show the CIO's office something special if you marry that along with a report that's actually like a service level objective? Like not only what is the risk, but how effectively can we recover in the event that something unknown or a new issue pops up?
Absolutely. So what helps me sleep well at night, is any CIO sleep well at night, is knowing that I've got.
Maybe that's the ultimate metric.
That's really is that's what we measure our general life success with, is can we sleep and are we really serving the company well? I like to know that our patching is current, our backups are current, and that our vulnerability assessment tool scores are within a comfortable risk range. And so when you marry that with, hey, we've met all of our service level objectives, and for the most part, our security threat risk is low, I can at least put in a few hours at night.
I think the other part for me is just making sure that we have the capacity, that we have the headroom for the services that we are delivering, that, okay, I know we can recover, I know we have backups, I know we have that, but am I sure that, for the next quarter, I can take on the next 100 customers that we are bringing on? Do we have the plan in place to actually get all of that? It's that, and for that I need to, I want to know about the metrics, about utilization right now of the database level, about the CPU, about all of those server metrics. I need to know at least at the high level where we're at. Are we at 80%, are we 90%, 95%? Database, do we see transaction time, spiking up right now over time? If we do, then what are we doing about that? It's really about that also.
And I think that I'm completely on the opposite end, where you guys have all these great tools, and sometimes IT departments don't have these tools. So it makes us reactive. I would love to have a report like that came to me and said, hey, this is, my backups are 95% and we'll be able to restore in this amount of time, where I don't really have that luxury in my area, which I wish that I did. So having that tool that you both explained would be wonderful in my world. But we're so small, and it's just reactive. I get a phone call that, there's a website down, or I have a monitoring tool that's given me maybe an email that we jump in and then we start to dive into, where I don't get the statistics first because, we're so small, we don't have time.
That makes sense, and I think that's why you have to kind of tailor your report to the needs and the size and the maturity of your business. And so maybe it's not something that actually a tool gave you this particular result, but that your team has done this body of work so that you have a lower risk.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So going back to sort of nerfing fail fast, so you're saying that it's actually easier to reassure the CIO with a good mitigation and recovery report than saying I have 8 nines or 1,000,000 nines of availability, and just them knowing that that's impossible?
For me, the way that we communicate is not so much a report that's telling us that we're meeting SLAs or giving me statistics on servers, or being able to prep for onboarding 100 customers and making sure that I have enough infrastructure in place to handle it. We're a small IT department, and my direct relation is with my CIO, and I walk in his office, and we basically have conversations once a week, if not almost every day, on where I see risk and things that I know that are risk, and I kind of say it in a verbal way, and we have a list of things we know in our head that are projects that need to be done, but the business has other priorities that come before those sometimes, and you're not given the resources. Not that they don't want to give you the resources, they just really don't understand what's going on the back end and things that really have to happen, from security. I mean, security is one of the hugest ones, one that will come and get you if you don't try to mediate before. And so our department works a little bit differently. I have worked for a retail company that was very good with the vulnerability reports. They were under compliance, and so they were required to do a lot of that. And when you're under compliance, I think it forces you to have those reports and SLAs and more, statistical planning than what we have. So, but I see both sides.
So basically you're saying one of the best ways of being noticed by leadership, and noticed in a good way instead of the way that sometimes IT gets noticed, is to have it's okay, I've got this report.
Yeah.
Basically.
That's a secret to getting promoted.
And trust.
I don't know if it's just the report. I think it's also your capability of reacting quickly and solving the problem and getting back your customer, in shape very quickly. I think that's for me at Kinzer, that's what my CEO and the rest of the executive team really care about. They know that the system is not perfect.
Yes.
Right.
But what they'll count on is the fact that we have a problem, we react, we go back to work.
It builds trust too.
Yes.
I mean, they have to trust the IT department is doing everything they possibly can to make sure the business is going to run fine.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is that tough part with the panel where I get to be dad and look at my watch and say we're about to run out of time. We have to wrap this up. Let's do this. Let's have each of you, I want to ask a question and let each of you take a chance to kind of think about this. And the idea here is I want you to sum up your thoughts on how the IT and the CIO's office can really improve communication, and especially to remind the business how indispensable IT truly is. So considering everything that you know now, what you've learned over the years, what has worked and what hasn't worked, if you could go back in time to a moment early in your IT career where you were successful, but you knew there was an opportunity to really accelerate your careers, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give the younger version of you on how to improve communication and even manage up?
Wow, that's a great one. So I'm an introvert, like an extreme introvert, and I kind of grew up with the philosophy in my head that IT should just be seen, it should work, but not really be heard. And so I shied away from opportunities to meet with our leadership and just share with them what we were focused on and how we were doing. And again, just kind of shadow in the background, it just works. And so I would tell myself to take that opportunity to meet with leadership, to share the good work that our team has done. Because what I learned when I did start doing it is that it gave me an opportunity to better align our priorities and our resources with their objectives, and actually end up serving the company better. So I would tell myself to take those opportunities to highlight and celebrate the great work that our teams are doing in IT, because there's no parades that are running in the background when IT does their job. We're kind of like, unfortunately, like plumbers. It's like
it's a utility.
It's just
Use
supposed
like
to work.
utilities,
And getting those opportunities in front of leadership to share the great work that our team has done it's really rewarding for all of us. And so that's what I would say. Take those meetings.
Yeah. I think for me, it goes along those lines. It's about thinking about just making the step to really understand who's on the other side, that you may be a great technologist, but technology doesn't happen just by itself.
Right.
It has to have a purpose and being applied at solving problems that people are experiencing. And the closer and the sooner you can actually close that gap and understand how you can make that person's happier and day-to-day life better because you apply what you know, then you're going to be that much more powerful and you're going to be much more successful faster versus living in your own bubble, being the greatest technologist of that tiny piece of technology that nobody really cares about from a business perspective. Very interesting, but you're in your own bubble. And what really matters is for you to break that bubble and really kind of reach out to the other people. So I think empathy and closing the gap there.
So if I could go back and tell myself, I'd tell myself a lot of things at that age. But from a career perspective, like we spoke before, I started as a field technician, working in a warehouse, fixing computers. And one thing I would probably tell myself is to start networking more, networking up, because I think you naturally progress from that to your love, which is you start working into networking, you get projects, you get involved, you start communicating. So just networking with your peers, people in your department, I think starts bringing you into projects when you start to bring things up that you're seeing, and I think that I would tell myself network.
It's interesting. The words that we end up using, network, trust, empathy, that really it seems to be most about finding ways and creating not just ways of communicating, but actually some reports on paper that allow your management and that uses the same language that senior leadership expects to see, to trust us to do the right thing, to trust us to deliver on time, to trust us when we say that's too much, that's too many requirements for this sprint, let's deliver this on time and then add that to the next one. Well, this has really been fantastic to have all of you with us today, and I hope all of you got a lot out of this and a lot of ideas about how you can communicate with your senior leadership better to get your really fantastic ITs to transform and really push your departments forward. Thanks again so much, Mindy Marks, Joel DeLisi, and Ronnie Johnson. It's been great to have you here. I kind of feel like we're going to have to do a podcast. I think all the cool kids are beginning to do that. You can let us know in chat if we should do that or not. So thanks again for SolarWinds. I'm Patrick Hubbard. I can't wait to see you on chat, and enjoy the rest of THWACKcamp.
THWACKcamp!